Welcome to Open Source Health, the podcast that doesn't just talk about fixing healthcare, we're actively doing it. I'm Trip Johnson, CEO of the Advita Collective, and I'm here to take you on a behind-the-scenes journey as we build a technology-forward, stakeholder-centric healthcare company. Our mission? Bring transparency and innovation to an industry that desperately needs both. Join us as we dive into the intersections of policy, technology, and hands-on healthcare, offering a rare glimpse into the challenges and triumphs of creating a system that works for everyone: patients, providers, policymakers, payers, and technologists alike. We'll share our journey of building in the open, and we'll have candid conversations with our team and other like-minded change makers who are as passionate as we are about revolutionizing healthcare. This is Open Source Health, where we don't just diagnose the problems, we roll up our sleeves and work on the solutions. Let's get started. So today we're going to discuss the fact that RFK is going to be leading the Department of Health and Human Services. What does that really mean for us, amongst other things? You know what's so funny about this? I've listened to so much commentary on all of the cabinet picks, but RFK, there's some crazy, quacky things he said and believes, and then there's also some normal stuff. And I think like one of the problems we have as like humans, especially with social media, is just the memification of our information. And it's like it's all good or it's all bad.
Yeah.
And there's tons of valid stuff that needs to change. You know, do I think that Dr. Oz should be leading CMS?
Yeah.
Probably not. I was thinking, how would I want to argue in a reasonable way about some of these outsider picks that are coming to shake things up?
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's deep policy information and knowledge that is necessary to effectively run an agency in theory. But then there's also this like leadership component, and there are these like nebulous things where like, can we inspire change? And you know, we should have a lot of like government officials who are long-term tenured that can navigate a lot of the policy. But quite frankly, RFK doesn't like the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, that makes a ton of sense. Now, the anti-vax positions, I think, are just fucking nuts.
The thing that kills me about this stuff is you can have legitimate grievances and gripes with something, but the answer to that isn't, well, let's just do the opposite. There's a nuanced position with this stuff. Like, arguably, vaccines, something like Ozempic, is one of the crowning features of us as a species. Like, this is something to take a tremendous amount of humanism pride in, right? It's this phenomenal thing that we've accomplished. And I've ranted on this before, but for the vast majority of human history, acquiring enough calories to keep these meat sacks pumping has been in inordinate amount of our time, and it's prevented us from being able to accomplish and tackle other things as a species. We solved that problem so well that we now are fat and out of shape and have metabolic disease. And then we told the gods to eat our ass, and then we created Ozempic. And then we're pushing back on this sort of thing. And so we calibrate as a species. I think this is this phenomenal accomplishment of infrastructure and expertise. But I hate this radical pushback, right? One of the things that drives me crazy about this sort of stuff is, listen, with RFK saying we need to have better diet, eat better, nutrition, exercise, no shit, Sherlock. We know that, right? Like, you've brought nothing novel to the table, but it's the implementation of that at a societal level that's really, really difficult and not likely to happen, right? So then the question becomes, how do you, in a very utilitarian way, affect what it is that you need to affect? Making organic food part of, like subsidizing organic food for the average American ain't going to do it. Most Americans don't want to eat a salad. Most people don't want to eat a salad or whatever, right? So it drives me crazy because it becomes this very performative gesture versus like, no, we actually have some very tangible real world ways of tackling some of these issues.
I mean, I have so many thoughts. One, we were talking last time about a mental health company whose mission was to take teen anxiety and depression from all-time highs to all-time lows. I was like, that's not the job of the mental health system. It's society that's failing people, and that's leading to mental health concerns. And we have a whole field of behavioral health professionals who address those concerns. But these are like societal issues. We're not solving the issue. I think that's one of those very fundamental paradigm shifts that I think you and I are both very interested in, and as a threat to, quote, the current business model and structure, right?
Right.
Because the problem is you want recurring appointments. For us, it's like, hey, you should be coming to therapy every week or every month, whatever that is. You should be seeing your psychiatrist on whatever interval. And so is the goal not to need care? Some people should absolutely, be receiving long-term care. I don't think the
Yeah.
goal is that no one's on meds and no one's going to
Right.
therapy, or that like it all needs to be brief intervention focused. Yeah, I find it really, really interesting because these societal issues, if we look at kind of the liberal side of things more recently, there has to be a reaction for every action. As we reduce stigma, which is great, we're now going to bring this mental health, this therapy speak into common culture. And all of a sudden, you got everyone diagnosing themselves from TikTok and talking about these problems. I think the Buddha said something about like, life is suffering type thing. And that's just part of being a human. Everyone needs to go watch the Disney movie Inside Out and
Yeah.
take the lesson away from it that they're not joy. They are
Yeah.
not supposed to be happy all the time, and something is wrong when you're not happy.
Right. We're these creatures that are experiencing this ebbing and flowing of states all the time. And trying to anchor into any one of those states is a place for suffering and strife, right? There's this, here, I want to read this quote real quick. I think this is actually sort of a good heuristic for anyone that's listening in terms of trying to navigate new health information, new fads, new health trends, all this sort of stuff. So one, my heuristic for this sort of stuff is, what is someone trying to sell to me, right? That's arguably the reason anyone's ever speaking to me is like, what are you trying to sell? And usually that's a pretty quick, easy to figure out thing if you just think of that, right? Someone may want to help you, and that may be part of it, but they're also looking to make money or sell or something like that. Maybe that's an overly cynical view of things. I think I just see it as a very practical, this is what it is to live in society. But there's this quote that comes to mind when you were talking, and it's from Abigail Schreier. She wrote a book called Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up. I'm sure if anybody listens to this, there's people aren't a huge fan of her because she took some pretty hardline stances on some of the trans issues and that sort of stuff. Again, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but she has this great quote from that book that just stands out to me hard, right? And it's just echoed around in my head. So anyway, she said, no industry refuses the prospect of exponential growth, and mental health experts are no exception. By feeding normal kids with normal problems into an unending pipeline, the mental health industry is minting patients faster than it can cure them. It's like, whew. Yeah, I mean, like, right? That's one of the things you're often talking about in terms of running a healthcare company is acquiring patients. And
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, it's weird. I think that's something we always have to sort of guard against. I can talk about this from my perspective in terms of writing SEO and digital content. You can write the sort of stuff that fuels that, right? People can do their searches. You're trying to find sort of common search terms so that people land on your website. You write material catering to that, but it's an icky feeling, right? Because a lot of times I don't necessarily believe the sort of content that's heavy SEO stuff that's out there, right? It's generally designed to sort of inspire people to seek out a service versus, do you actually need this? Or is the answer something like something that you're just a normal human being with normal pathologies or normal experiences? Let's not even call them pathologies.
Well, and I think like one of those interesting to that point, and I don't know how to say this. I just saw a post about there's this. He was an AI writer, but he's now a transdisciplinary polymath. And he actually is.
So,
But he
yeah.
talks a ton about, he actually has been on a couple of like psychedelic retreats recently. And he's very concerned about like the future of the world. And then he has come back to just like, how do I take care of myself? What do I need to do to exist peacefully? And he just had a post about sleep, right? So there's so much of this, like, and again, like, let's not make it too oversimplified. But when we talk about sleep, when we talk about, nutrition, when we talk about exercise,
Mhm.
like those are the basics. If you're not doing that, let me just make it personal. If I don't do that, I am incredibly dysregulated. I don't feel good in my skin. I'm not saying they solve every problem, right? Like there are all these events that happen in life that require more significant, mental health interventions. But like a lot of times that feeling, like my anxiety is through the roof if I don't exercise.
Yeah.
Or like I've learned that eating too much makes me feel awful, but I love eating. I have had to navigate a relationship with food that isn't,
Yeah.
chaotic, I guess. I think like so much of this is just finding what works for you. I think we both like Andrew Huberman some and then Lane Norton. I
Love Lane.
really like all of Lane Norton's stuff where he basically debunks any diet or any
Yeah.
exercise routine as like there's a way to do this correctly. But there are all these principles. Or if we talk about Peter Attia's book, like that's what got me back into lifting weights because I
Same.
was
Yeah.
like, oh man, there's just like my body's gonna break down as I get older, and if I'm not doing like resistance training, I am much more likely to suffer from a fall when I'm 60 or 70
Right.
and not recover from it or break a hip. So it's really interesting, and these are not sexy interventions, right?
No.
These are not taking a pill. This is not Ozempic. This is
Right.
not like an SSRI, which
Yeah.
dubious, effectiveness, obviously. Um, but we all want the quick fix, and the fact that it's not, and I think like that's the RFK stance to some extent too, is
Yeah.
like it's not that big of a like we have to do these things. And then it leads us back to like a bigger problem with society is like how do people with like I'm just gonna use like people with kids, like my wife and I you're just like, how do like normal people do this? We feel very privileged. We're able to pay for
Right.
childcare. I mean, I work a ton, but I can, work my own hours to some extent. If I need to
Yeah.
leave, I leave. And so I squeeze in, my yoga sometimes during the day, or I go to the gym during the workday. But that's not reasonable for most people. I definitely feel like we have these massive structural problems that are going to make us less and less happy. And it is because we have this weird 9 to 5 lifestyle or whatever where we're sedentary. And that goes against our biological nature, so it's natural that we would be uncomfortable going against our nature to some extent.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, it's the 80-20 rule, right? Like, we're always looking. The problem that I always have with people like RFK or the or like the influencers and stuff is it's very rarely are they talking about something like Lane Norton's talking about, where it's like, yeah, it's years over years, or what Peter Attia is talking about, just years over years of, yeah, you lift weights, you get some cardiovascular exercise, you sleep 8 hours a night. That's going to take care of 80% of your health outcomes. And then there's just going to be stuff that's beyond your control. Sometimes you're just going to get a genetic shit roll of the dice and you get cancer, and that sucks. I remember when I was growing up as a kid in Eastern North Carolina, there was this weird taboo against exercising, especially for adults. It was viewed as a superfluous, weird thing that had this connotation behind it. But there was this guy that he was like the only adult that I ever knew growing up that exercised. He would do these like half triathlons. And it was this very weird sight to see a dude running in my hometown. He would
Uh-huh.
run, ride a bike, he would swim, he'd go to the gym. Anyway, I always remember adults chattering about him. They'd be like, well, that guy, his body's going to break down when he's going to regret that when he's 50 or whatever. He's going to regret that when he's 60. And what was funny to me was like, yeah, but you're 30 and your body's destroyed. You're dealing with all of the outcomes of being sedentary. There's a cost to that. This guy being active is, a net gain and whatever. And in all reality, he's going to be way healthier at 60.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is he ended up dying of cancer very early, like 45, right? And so the lesson that I remember as a child that a lot of adults took from that was, see, exercise isn't useful. It's like everybody dies. And it's like, right, but you're playing with the margins there. Like, this guy was a complete outlier for his relative lifestyle. He just got unlucky. In some degree, that's going to happen. But then it just becomes, how do you stack the stuff in your favor, right? It's nothing's 100%. Nobody makes it out of this thing alive. So the question becomes, how do we stack percentages in our favor to live as well as we can, as long as we can? That's what I always love about Aptia's work, is it's not about longevity, it's about quality of life. Like, how do you extend quality of life? But when you listen to these influencers and this sort of stuff, they always have a vitamin or some sort of supplement or something that's stem cells that, like, whatever, some unproven thing that, yeah, listen, if it has any benefits, you're playing on the margins versus, hey, listen, are you exercising 5 days a week? Are you doing load bearing exercises, mobility work, cardiovascular, and keeping a caloric balance? Because, like, if you're not doing those things, then you're Like, what's the point of taking this vitamin other than make someone money?
So the big takeaway is go outside and touch grass, as the kids say.
Grass, yeah, as the kids say. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think that's one of the things, and it is a place of privilege. Because my wife does, public health research and
mhm,
specifically around nutrition. These are really, really complex
right,
societal problems. I think that most people, both on that bro influencer side, or if you go on the hippie organic food side, these are things that are being fought on the margins a lot of times, and you don't need to go that crazy. Like, try and eat some vegetables, probably like RFK, like ultra processed foods aren't that great. Yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense. If you're drinking, Mountain Dews and eating blue colored Takis, that's probably not great. Then, of course, there's the societal piece where it's like, what if you live in a food desert, and how expensive is it to actually get calories? And if your life revolves around scraping by, and this is where you get a little happiness, that's what you need to do. I think being prescriptive about lifestyle changes is such a personal thing, but hopefully we as society can structure it better.
yeah. There's this. I just real quick before we wrap up. I think the conflation with this stuff, and it always drives me crazy. It's this anti-chemical thing, right? It's
Mm,
always we don't want chemicals. We don't want chemicals in our food. It's just like it's not the chemicals in the food. It's that the chemicals make the food delicious. But all of life is chemicals. We're chemicals. Everything's
yeah.
made up of chemicals. It's just all natural fallacy. And we can wrap up with this. But I had a conversation with a friend a couple of months ago, a jujitsu teammate that was he was struggling with his alcohol use, and so he kind of knows what I've done in the past. Like, so he starts talking to me. And he says something like, you know, I'll be good for about 2 or 3 months, right? I'll get back into exercising. I'm sleeping. I don't really drink, and I don't have any issues, and everything's going great. And then suddenly start drinking again. And then I'll go off the rails and drink really heavy. He's like, I got to figure out why I'm doing that. It's like, well, you're describing alcoholism. He's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But like, I think it's because I'm really dealing with some depression stuff. And it's like, no, no, I think you're just talking about the alcoholic cycle. You're just talking about craving and loss of control. You're describing all the symptoms of alcoholism, right? I was like, well, you could try some meetings, you go to therapy, you could do all this other sort of stuff. And then I was like, you just try like naltrexone, right? It's really good for helping reduce cravings. If you're just a moderate drinker historically that struggles with these periods, it might be really effective. And his response will never blow, like his total bro influencer. He's like, I don't want to put any chemicals in my body. I was like, yo, champ, you're like drinking literal poison and
Yeah.
you don't want to take a pill that is because it's from the pharmaceutical. Like Jack
Yeah.
Daniels Jack Daniels is your doctor. That's cool.
Yeah.
But
That logical fallacy
it kills me.
um, never ceases to amaze me. All
Yeah.
right. Anyway, I got to run. That was fun. We'll do it again soon.
All right, cool. Bye.